Today on the Founder Content Studio podcast, we're joined by Evan Sitler, CEO and co-founder of XpertVR, an entrepreneur who is reshaping the educational field. We discuss the current state of XR, how AI is being used within Evan's company, and a whole bunch of different topics to do with the metaverse, AI, and a whole lot about business as well. Stay around and Evan tells us exactly how he started XpertVR, and he talks about all of the stories and businesses he did before that point as well. It will give you a really good insight on how Evan has now scaled his company to 15 plus employees with another one of his co-founders, and really where he started as well. So stick around to the end. I feel like you're going to get a lot of insight out of this one, and I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Cool. We're live. Evan, thanks for joining. I realized actually when I was thinking about this podcast, like 30 minutes or 40 minutes before we started, that we've actually communicated online for a long time. I think like 3 years nearly.
Probably about that, yeah. No,
yeah.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no worries, man. But I realized that I know about XpertVR more than I actually know about you. So the idea of the start of this is really for me to get to know you a little bit more on a personal level. So Tell me a little bit about, who Evan was when he was a little bit younger. Where did you grow up? What did life look like? Tell me a little bit of that, because I realize I know pretty much nothing about you.
Yeah, for sure. Grew up in Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario, so about an hour and a half from Toronto. And I think most famously, it's known for where BlackBerry, or what was Research in Motion, started. And I think having BlackBerry here actually, as well as just my parents being in the entrepreneurial space, that was a lot of my childhood. I was always helping my mom and stepdad flip houses, because they flipped a bunch of houses as I was growing up. They had all kinds of side businesses that I would help out with. My dad used to have a photography business that I didn't really help with, but knew about. And then just growing up in Kitchener-Waterloo, it is called the Silicon Valley of Canada. So it's where all these different companies, well, first of all, BlackBerry started, but then now Google has an office here. Sony has an office for PlayStation, Desire to Learn, Applyboard. There's all kinds of these large ed tech and technology companies based out of here. And so it's growing up, I was always interested in entrepreneurship and just got interested in business courses throughout high school. And that kind of just led me into the business space. But I guess outside of that, I love camping, Marvel, Star Wars, and lately NFTs and the crypto space I've been interested in as well. That's a little bit about me, I guess.
Nice. And do you think that your parents being entrepreneurial had like a big impact on you then walking down that path yourself?
I think so. It was both my parents were always so hardworking, and unfortunately they did get divorced when I was 4 years old. So both of them having to have their own house that they had to pay for and have their own mortgages and everything, saw that there was some stress there, and having those side gigs and things that they were doing definitely helped with that. So it was something that I was always kind of aware of, and definitely inspired me to, at I think the age of 9 or 10, on my LinkedIn, I started a pet care business. So like that was my first kind of venture in. And then after that, I started all kinds of other little businesses growing up. And so, yeah, it definitely influenced me a lot.
What was one of the, so you had the pet care business. What were some of the other early on businesses that you may not have told people about that are a bit like, wow, did I really start something like, because I personally I have some of those companies as well, like back in the day. I'm like, what was I thinking? But tell me a little bit, do you have any that come to mind?
Yeah, like there's all the classic ones here in Canada, like raking leaves and shoveling driveways and those sorts of things. I think probably the wackiest one, but like I guess in some parts of the States it's pretty normal. We were spray painting curbs. So in front of a house, we would go and we'd say like, hey, we're gonna spray paint reflective paint on your curb so that if an ambulance or emergency vehicle is trying to find your house, it's very easy for you for them to find it. And so yeah, we went around and a bunch of neighborhoods. We just had these like stencils of all the different numbers, 1 to 9, and yeah, we'd put them together and spray paint that reflected paint on curbs. So me and two friends did that for a whole summer basically, and yeah, it was kind of a wacky business. I think I saw some article about a 12-year-old doing it and making a bunch of money in LA or something like that. So I was like, oh, that sounds like a cool idea, and yeah.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, that definitely reminds me. Sorry, in England, if you do that, I swear you'd get like arrested by the police for graffiti or something. They think you're some graffiti artist with a stencil. Or I don't know if you've ever heard of the guy Banksy. He's like a
Of course,
really,
yeah,
like
yeah.
super famous guy. He was renowned for using stencils for doing graffiti.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. No, yeah, I think when we were like, I think it was 14 or so is when we were doing it. So I think we were just going, hopefully if the police come up to us, they'll take pity on our young age and everything.
Cool, cool. And then did you go to college, university? What was that like? And was that in Canada or the US?
Yeah, in Canada, right on the border though, just St. Catharines, which is basically touching Niagara Falls. So I went to Brock University. Ended up being I stretched the 4-year program out to a 6-year because I ended up starting the business in the third year. But yeah, I went to university. I kind of at that point my entrepreneurial spirit, I guess, had been dampened. I don't know exactly. I think it was girls and stuff at the time that I got distracted with. And so yeah, it was third year in university. I was like, okay, I need to start like doing more and getting more involved. And so I joined business clubs, and one of the groups that I joined was BioLink, which is now called the Brock Link, and it's the entrepreneurial incubator on campus. So going there, I signed up for a tour basically, almost didn't go to the tour, showed up. I was the only person out of 20 people or so that showed up. And my now business partner, Drew McNeil, he was the ambassador for the incubator. So he gave me the tour and we got to know each other. And my big idea for my business was to start a t-shirt drop shipping company. And so he gives me this whole tour and we get to the back and he's like, and this is my heat press where I make t-shirts and do custom designs. And I was like, well, that was my idea. I can't compete with this guy. So then I bought a 360 camera because that was my second idea to just play around with that, and led into the VR space.
And then, so you went from a t-shirt idea into VR, and it's a pretty good pivot. I like it. I don't know how that adds up. Do you come from like a technical background though?
No, not at all. Not at all. And I still like, I guess growing up, I had like a YouTube channel or a couple different YouTube channels. So I was into that like video editing space. But other than that, no technical background. So yeah.
Okay. And then, so you were more into the business side of things. So the entrepreneurial, like sales, marketing. Okay. How do we grow this thing? How do we acquire customers? Cool.
Exactly.
And then, so you and Drew then, so how did Expert VR then, like, so you had the idea of like 360 cameras. How did that then start to turn into Expert VR, and how did that journey look like a little bit?
Yeah, it was a winding road, and a lot of things happened. Really, to the start of Expert VR was about a year. So I joined the incubator on campus, got a 360 video camera, and there was another entrepreneur in the space who had also just ordered a 360 camera. So I got mine, and he was like, "Oh, mine's coming in from China, this other brand," and so we'll mess around. So we started hanging out. Harrison Olagis, he runs Up 360 Media, and we started Up 360 together in 2016. And starting that, we just got into shooting 360 videos, and we decided in the summer of 2017 that we kind of wanted to go separate directions with the business. And by that time, Drew had gotten involved, and we had bought a VR headset, the HTC Vive, the original one, and a computer together. And so we kind of owned that together. And then Harrison was involved on the other side of the video side of the business. And so we decided to go separate ways, still good friends with Harrison, and we still work together. But then that was in 2017, we started Expert VR, but it is very different today from what it was then. Basically, we had one 360 camera and the HTC Vive headset, and basically what we were doing, we went to birthday parties, weddings, different conferences, all kinds of big events where we would just set up the VR headset, rent it out at an hourly rate, and license different games that we would run people through. And I think it was that year and a half that we were doing that. Everyone that came up to our booth at these events was like, "Oh, so you made these games? This is really cool." And it's like, "Oh, no, we're just licensing the games." And they're like, "Oh, so you made the hardware?" And it's like, "No, we just bought the hardware off of somebody." And they're like, "Oh, okay, so you're just here like a bouncy castle." And it's like, "Yeah, basically." And so that kind of led us down the route of like, okay, we need to either learn how to develop, which we learned is very difficult. So instead, we decided to hire on a team, and that's when we had some money saved up from running that rental business as well as working some part-time jobs, and then we won some pitch competitions and were able to bring on a development team in 2019, and that's when it really started growing into what it is today.
That's a pretty cool story. I love the comparison to the bouncy castle. I can see that. I can see that. And then so when you hire your first employee, what's the game plan from there? So you're obviously a developer, right? I'm guessing it was a developer. And then how did you
Unity
go
developer.
about hiring that first customer? How did that look like?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think our first customer was at Brock University, working with them on a trying to think which order they came in now, but I believe the first one was building out a virtual version of an LCBO. So that's our Liquor Control Board of Ontario, and they control all the liquor stores here in Ontario. So working with Brock University, who's in the Niagara region, lots of wine here or there. They wanted to research what consumer behavior was like in wineries. So we started working with them at the same time. We had just kind of consulted on this, like, I don't know, hackathon type event with another consumer behavior company, not a university though, in Mississauga, just outside of Toronto. And they had wanted to do similar research on a bank. So we had those two kind of contracts, I guess, sort of lined up at the time. And we're like, okay, we need a developer to come on, and we can kind of, with the money that we have from those contracts, and we definitely underpriced ourselves, we're like, we can bring on this developer for 4 months. And basically he was in school at the time, Josh Ugamino, and we brought him on for those 4 months. We were still working part-time jobs, so we had extra income coming in to pay Josh, and that's when we were able to build out those two contracts kind of at around the same time. And that kind of showed that we could develop VR simulations, but also showed a lot of weaknesses where very quickly Josh was like, we need to hire on a 3D modeler, we need a technical artist. And he had two friends, Harris and Chris, still on the team, both rock stars, and they were like, yep, let's join on, and paying them part-time, and started locking in other contracts.
Nice. I swear, going back to what you said about underpricing yourself straight away, that is such a classic, like, newbie entrepreneur business thing to do. Just like, maybe if we just charge like a little bit less than everybody else and do like a little bit more, maybe then we'll get more business.
Yeah. That's exactly. Like, even before those contracts back in 2016, the first contracts we did with 360 Video, I think we charged around $12,000 for Niagara Falls Tourism to shoot 5 videos of different attractions in 360. And we were so excited. We found out that we got it. And then I think it was a month later or so that we were in a car with one of our competitors coming from an event, but we were friendly, so we were sharing a car. And we're just chatting, and he's like, "Oh, you bid on that contract too, and you won it. Like, mind if I ask you what you bid on?" And we're like, "Yeah, 12,000." He's like, "Oh, we put in a bid for like, I think it was like 50 or 60,000." And we're like, "Oh, okay." So we probably could have come in at the 40,000 and still won it, but yeah.
Hindsight is a beautiful thing sometimes, isn't it? But
Yes.
you live and learn. You live and learn. And then, okay, let's fast forward a little bit to like where you guys are today. So
Mhm.
I know a little bit about your model. I know a little bit about like what customers we have, but like if somebody is listening that doesn't know anything about what you guys are currently doing in like the XR space, how would you explain that to somebody?
Yeah, we do two things at XpertVR. So kind of our bread and butter since 2019 has been custom development. So we have people coming to us, as well as we're going to different people in the education and government spaces, and a few enterprise clients, but mostly academic and government. and we're seeing where there's a lack of training or there needs to be more hands-on training. And we'll work with that person and with the industry experts that they have within their department to build out a simulation that has like the process-based training, but also is very accessible. It's engaging because there's a story built around it. So people are excited to go in and go through the simulation. They're also excited because it's VR. And then we're also tracking data in the background to make sure that it's making an impact on their training or their education. So that's kind of our bread and butter partnering. And that's kind of like a 4 to 8 month process, depending on the project, where we're building out this very custom simulation for their training needs or their education needs. And then what we've now started to do is partner with some of those clients that we've had in the past, as well as just some government grants that we've gotten to build out products. So either we're building out products completely in-house, partnering with some industry experts for their expertise, or we're going to a client that we've already worked with and we say, hey, we have some really amazing IP here, but we need your continuous support, both on the expertise and possibly the funding side of things, to build out these products. So how about we have like a revenue share on something and build it out further? And so we've done that with our firefighter training products, and then we've built out a police training product as well, and are now getting those into government agencies for training in-house.
Nice. Because we talked about this in the company I work at, is SenseLove, and we always talk about how can virtual reality training be more scalable. And one of the problems that I personally saw with first responders or firefighting or police is that to make it scalable across borders is quite difficult because everyone has different rules, regulations. So when you have a firefighting training, do you just then have that across Canada? And I guess it's different than when you cross the border over to the US, right?
Yeah, it's not too different. The firefighting space especially isn't too different. There's definitely a couple nuances, but for the most part, it's the same. So we don't have to like really change too much, especially with the type of training that we're doing right now. On the law enforcement side of things, especially between like Canada and the US, for example, obviously there's some big differences there. Use of force and those sorts of things are very different, and different threats that they're dealing with as well. So there are some differences there. That said, we're kind of sticking away from any of the areas where you would need to make those tweaks. So for example, we're big fans of Axon, and they make all of the tasers that police officers use and all the body cams that they use. So they have simulations that they've created of how to use guns and use tasers in those types of scenarios. And we're kind of like, let's take a step back and create simulations before you get to the point where you need to draw any sort of weapon, whether that be a gun or a taser or anything else. And so we're kind of in that middle ground where we can stay away from a lot of those complexities that would change from country to country, as well as over the past 6 months, we've been developing out an in-house authoring tool that allows us to make changes really quickly. So as that's coming to the completion of development, now we're going to start looking at some of those more complex use cases where if we're going into a certain country or a certain state where there needs to be those changes, we can talk with the experts within that state or that country and make the changes really quickly.
Yeah. Because I'm guessing having pre-built assets or products is the main value, right? And then it's much more scalable the next time you do it and do it and do it and do it. That's the beauty of, I guess, niching to a certain sector instead of just being like, oh, okay, I work in healthcare. We'll take a healthcare product and then, oh, wait, but now there's somebody over there in an engineering company and then we have to build everything from scratch again. So yeah,
Exactly.
I see how that would work.
Yeah, and so much cost savings for clients as well when we're going in and we're like, hey, it's going to cost you 100,000 to 500,000 to build this simulation versus 10,000 to 50,000 to buy it off the shelf and have it ready to go. It's huge benefits.
Yeah, and I'm sure the people on the receiving end are very happy with that kind of discount. What's the idea for the future then? So what is there? Is there like a dream project that you would have? Is there a dream company to work with? Because again, I don't really know that much about the system integrator side of things. I don't know who is like the dream company to work with. So have you got like a project that you're working towards or a company you're working towards with?
Yeah, I would say there's kind of three big milestones that we're aiming for over the next probably 10 years or so. In the short term, our major project that we're talking to a bunch of different partners and people about is in the emergency services space, because we have law enforcement, we have firefighting, and then we're looking at paramedics or possibly partnering with a paramedic company. And basically in that space, we're looking at how could we build out a replica of a town, or not, or a replica of a fake town, I guess, in virtual reality, where you can have every aspect of public safety training on their own, but then on a yearly basis, whether it's in an education institution or in government, they're able to get together and run through some sort of major disaster, natural disaster, terrorist attack, something along those lines, where everyone can work together. So throughout the year, we have firefighters going into this made up town, and they're practicing everything that they have to do, from command down to search and rescue. We have police officers going in, similar thing, everything from command right down to doing forensic identification in a scene. And similar for every branch, there's like 6 or 7 different branches of public safety. So they're all able to practice that together, but then at the end of the year, come into this large simulation and have a natural disaster happen, and everyone has to coordinate together. So that's our short term, like 2 to 3 years. We're looking to build out all of the different modules needed for something along those lines and then bring them all together. And we have a couple partners that are very excited about that as well. So they're working alongside us. Then in the, I guess, 2 to 3 years past that, we're looking at doing similar things for multiple industries. We like being in the emergency services space and are seeing the impact that it's making, and it's obviously a very important industry. But we want to help revolutionize the whole education system. Not saying that we're going to do it all, but helping and collaborating with people in multiple areas. So building out simulations for all kinds of industries, so that we have this large library that a university or college could come to us, and basically we have at least to a certain degree every course that they offer having different materials available for them. And then moving past that, like we would love to like be the company that is like the education space of the metaverse, whatever that is, in the future. But at the same time, that takes a lot of funding, a lot of resources, and we're kind of looking at the market right now, and we see Roblox or Fortnite or Meta or these companies that are building these metaverse platforms that in the next 10 years we could see how we could integrate with. And that's where we're kind of looking, like maybe 10 years down the road, instead of us building something, we could get acquired by one of those large companies that is building the infrastructure of the metaverse, and we become their education division and build out more courses that are available through them. So those are kind of the 3 milestones and big projects or goals that we're heading towards.
Nice. And with education, I had a terrible experience in the educational industry. We'll just leave it there. We won't dive any deeper into that one. But is there a resistance? Is there a resistance within education to adopt VR?
Less and less. There definitely has been. I would say almost every school that we talk to these days, universities and colleges, we're not really in the K-12 space too much, but universities and colleges, I would say almost every one of them have some VR headsets. They're mostly collecting dust on a shelf somewhere at a lot of these institutions, because it's a funny, at least in Canada and the US, it's a funny space where you'll get funding for the hardware, but not for the software, or vice versa. And it's only allowed to be used for one use case for 1 to 2 years, and then you can start sharing the hardware. So we're at this interesting turning point where we're seeing that a lot of colleges and universities have this hardware, and the grants they needed to use them with are kind of over. And so now we're talking to colleges and universities, and we're like, hey, we're giving you this for free, or we have a very discounted price on some of the software that you can get. And they're like, oh, I'll call up my library. And then they call them up and they're like, oh yeah, we have 25 headsets sitting here, so you can use them in your class. So yeah, very excited to see it being adopted more, but there has been some pushback, and it's really only the past 6 months to a year that we've seen higher adoption rates.
Yeah, and you mentioned like you guys are offering educational VR courses, I guess. Is that what it is? And what
course
what
material, I guess. Yeah, it's all kinds of things. So like I mentioned, there's the firefighting and policing. Like in that, there's a whole range. Our best or our favorite simulation is our search and rescue. So you're going in, you have 4 firefighters all working together in a multiplayer environment, as well as a commander outside being able to select where's the fire within this building and what building you're going into, um, all kinds of different aspects of where the victims are smoke alarms on, all those sorts of things. And then the 4 firefighters have to do and go in and do their full search and rescue procedure, from breaking down the door to doing full search to bringing victims out, doing all their call outs on their radio. They have access to all their tools, axe, Halligan bar, flashlight, etc. Um, so we have things along those lines, all the way down to the soft skills side of things, where we just built out a simulation that's now readily available to over 900,000 students here in Ontario. And it's an EDI simulation. And schools are now rolling this out for all of their faculty and students, where they can go into the simulation and there's 4 different scenarios around equity, diversity, and inclusion, as well as accessibility. And we're not putting you in the shoes of somebody who's like in a wheelchair or is hard of hearing or blind or anything along those lines. We're putting you across the table from that person and in situations that are from the real world, where you have to have a conversation with them and understand what they're going through. So for example, um, Niagara College, it was our partner, one of our partners on the project, and they had a real world scenario where a gentleman, he was getting out of his car and he was in a wheelchair. His girlfriend came and helped him get into his wheelchair, gave him a kiss, drove away. And the next day he got called into the security office, and somebody said that he was harassing his social worker or his aide, because they thought because he was in a wheelchair he couldn't have a girlfriend, and the person that was helping him out wasn't his girlfriend. And it was a real story that happened. And then so you go through that situation as the security officer, having that conversation, as well as learning about the accessibility barriers that come up when you're in a wheelchair. So yeah, everything from the search and rescue, very hard skills of going in and fighting a fire, down to those soft skills of having those types of difficult conversations.
Interesting. I would have never ever seen or thought of that as a use case, so that's blown my mind a little bit. But yeah, very relevant stuff that people wouldn't even think of using VR for. How have you found as a company the last 6 months to a year? Because I've noticed within the industry it has slowed down with the talk of ChatGPT, AI, large language models. That seems to have overshadowed the metaverse, as you said, whatever that is, who knows. But
Yeah.
how have you found it as a company as a whole over the last 6 months to a year? Have you noticed it's slower than it was this time in 2021 or 2022?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely slowed down. I think it's partially on the AI side of things. Obviously, we also had the big crypto and NFT wave that there was a lot of hype around, that was, I guess, around the same time of all the metaverse talk as well. So it's been waves. I would say we've definitely seen a slowdown over the past 6 months to a year. That said, I don't know if, I guess it's probably because of the AI side of things, but now we're seeing this very large uptick of interest. I think it's because Apple's about to release their headset, Meta has their new headset coming out, Samsung and Google are partnering, Google and Nintendo are partnering, uh, Lenovo has their new headset out. Like, there's so many new headsets coming out over the next couple months, or at least just partnerships being announced, that we've seen like a large uptick of. I think people, they just took a step back to try and understand the hardware landscape, as well as took a step back just to be like, we need to put a lot of thinking into what we're doing in these VR simulations. So let's really take the time to design them and make sure we have the proper funding. And now we're seeing all of these requests for proposals from educational institutions and government organizations coming out. And I know in Ontario, we're hearing that the experiential learning funding has gone up by 10 times with their new announcement coming out. So it's like, I think people got really excited about AI, and then we're like, but we're also still really interested in VR, and we just need to take this deep breath to understand what is the right next step to go down. And I feel like in the new year, we're going to see a large emergence of virtual reality with all these new headsets coming out, the hype around it.
Yeah, I hope so. It's funny how you mentioned around partnerships, because whenever there's a hype, like there is with, or like there was with the metaverse and virtual reality, I feel like a lot of attention goes to the space, a lot of money goes to the space. Everyone has these ideas of starting VR companies or XR companies. And then when the hype slowly comes down, a lot of people have to partner because there's not enough room in the space and then not enough, as much money in the space. And it's either partner or die. And I think maybe not the big headsets, but I think maybe in like the haptics industry and other industries, you will see more companies in the next few years partnering together because there isn't as much room in the space to sell. What you mentioned, the partnership between Nintendo and Google, was that? I didn't know about that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I had a post blow up on LinkedIn earlier this week talking about it, and obviously it's very early stages, and I got a few comments on LinkedIn talking about like Google Stadia and all the failed Google projects. So I am very aware. I was one of the founding purchasers of Google Stadia, so I am still a little annoyed that they shut that down. But I just think it's very exciting. Basically, yeah, they announced that they are collaborating right now. Who knows when they'll actually release a headset? I have heard that Samsung and Google's partnership might have an announcement in October, I believe, or start of November, something like that. So I think that's a little bit sooner. But yeah, apparently Nintendo and Google are collaborating on building a VR headset, and I guess would be
Whoa.
a future Nintendo device. Yeah.
No. You also mentioned Lenovo, and I like Lenovo as a brand, and I actually know some of the people at Lenovo as well. I'd never ever bash them as a company, but I don't think I've ever seen anybody with a Lenovo headset. They look beautiful. I've tried them, but I've just never come across a company that's gone, oh yeah, we want to use Lenovo. I've never ever heard of it. Did you come across it?
I know 4 or 5 years ago we saw a couple people. I think they just had some interesting partnerships already on like Lenovo ThinkPads and those sorts of devices where they were able to get some good discounts on the Lenovo MR headsets from Microsoft. But yeah, no, I haven't heard too much. I think this new headset that they are bringing out, I'm interested to hear more about just because they have been pretty focused on the enterprise and education spaces with their ThinkPads and other devices. So I could see how they could kind of push into the space that, to be honest, like Meta isn't really pushing into the enterprise or education space too much. Obviously, HTC is a little bit more. So yeah, I'm curious to see it, but no, I haven't seen too many people trying it out or
And
getting it.
what's your early opinion on the Apple headset? Everyone's got an opinion on it. Price point, it's typical Apple, overpriced, but looks really nice. What do you think?
Yeah, like that's just it. Overpriced looks really nice. Well, maybe not overpriced. Like I think it's too expensive for most people, but for what it is, I don't think it's necessarily overpriced. Like we're one of the software partners of Vario, and they
Mhm.
make amazing products, and they cost more than that. Plus, you need to get a computer to run a Vario at the moment.
Yeah,
So like, I don't
that is a
think it's
fantastic headset, Vario.
yeah, yeah.
They're the best in my opinion.
Oh, hands down, I agree. We were at CES in 2020 and tried the XR1, and within 5 days we signed on as a partner and bought an XR1, and now we have the XR3. Yeah, like incredible headset, and yeah, kind of just blows everybody's minds when you're in their mixed reality
Yeah,
experiences. So I'm hoping that we're getting a very similar experience to what Vario is able to provide on the Apple Vision Pro, but completely wireless or no computer that's hooked up to it and everything. So very interested. I'm especially excited for their hand tracking and eye tracking because uh, I think it's an area that VR has to head towards to make it more accessible for people, especially the hand tracking side of things. And with them announcing that they're going to have partners, I believe Roblox, was it Roblox or Rec Room, one of the two, is a partner of Apple with the new headset coming out. So hearing that, it's like, okay, they're going to have some fully VR experiences within either of those platforms that work with hand tracking. So it's going to be interesting, and I think it will really push the industry forward. But I do think it's a developer headset for the next year or two. I'm excited for version 3, version 4. It's, I think, similar to the iPhone. Not everyone had the iPhone 1, but by the time we had version 4, the iPhone 4, like everybody had an iPhone. So
yeah, and it's good to have like another big company other than Meta in the space.
Agreed.
It's good for everybody that Apple have come in and said, yeah, well, we're here, and Meta, you're not going to be able to just walk all over everybody like you have for like the last 2-3 years. So
Yes.
hopefully it's good for the space.
Agreed. No, it can't be anything but good. And I think we're seeing that with Google and Samsung announcing, Google and Nintendo announcing, like I have to assume that that was pushed forward at least partially because of Apple entering the market, and they don't want to be seen as entering in 3 years from now with like the first product and Apple already having version 3 or version 4 out. So yeah, very excited to see what the competition brings to light.
And what do you think about mass adoption? So this is something that I talk about with some of my friends all the time. Is like, because I have friends in the space and I have friends very much out of the space who have literally don't even know what virtual reality is. What do you think is holding back like the mass adoption at the moment? Is it the headsets? Like, is it the size? Is it the quality? Is it the fact that there's not enough games, or there's not actually a metaverse that was promised?
Yeah, all of the above, I guess. I think all of them play into it. I think the content side is the biggest, and not necessarily not enough games. I think there's lots of amazing games. I haven't been playing as often as of late, but was playing Population One on a daily basis, basically the Fortnite of VR for those that don't know, and still play pretty regularly, as well as jumping into Rec Room. Our team jumps in and into Remio and fights dragons at least once a week, and so like there's all kinds of different games out there, and I think the games will just keep getting better and better, and we're seeing like GTA and other AAA games coming to VR. So I think that side's good. I'm more interested on like obviously for us the education side, but also just the enterprise and like daily use side of things, which I think plays its hand more towards the augmented reality side of things than it does VR. So I guess the hardware does need to catch up partially to be able to support that, like Apple is trying to do with their augmented reality. So, yeah, I think it's that daily use where we saw computers in the early days was just kind of used by early adopters and nerds and playing around with it. But by the time that once it got to the point where anybody could jump on and use it for work and it was really making them more efficient at work, then they got a computer at home, and then their kids started playing games on it, or they started playing games on it, and then it was used for so many more things, and now we use computers and phones for everything. So it's getting to that point where it can be used for multiple functions, and I don't think it's not quite there yet, especially with like you might say, oh, you can meet in VR and have team meetings there, but if that's the only function that you have for it, you're not going to buy headsets for every employee in your business unless you are a VR company. So
Yeah, I agree. And I'm reading a stat here that's saying that 31% of US adults have never heard of the term the metaverse. But then
really?
that makes me think that like around 31% of adults have actually never heard of Bucharest either, for example. Or
Right.
no offense, Americans, sorry, but it's that whenever I see just US stats like not knowing stuff, I just think of geography. But that kind of doesn't surprise me in a way. But then it does also surprise me that 69% have heard of it. And
Yeah.
so, what like if somebody was to ask you, Evan, you know about VR, what is the metaverse?
Yes. Classic question. Yeah. Yeah. I always just say it's the next iteration or the next evolution of the internet. I think Meta tries to explain it with all kinds of fancy words, and Apple tries to completely avoid it at all. I think it's just we had kind of internet 1.0, even though we've just called it internet, but we had a 1.0 where we were kind of building the initial platforms for like businesses to reach us, I guess. So like the Amazons of the world and things along those lines. Now we've had Web 2.0, where now consumers can go on and create posts like social posts, as well as creating their own sites with things like Shopify and easy to use platforms. And now we're like, okay, we've got the business side, we've got the consumer side. Now we just need to continue evolving that on how content can be shared from both sides. And obviously we've seen things like video come in, but I would say that's part of Web 2.0, and now we're moving towards Web 3.0, Web 3, Metaverse, whatever you want to call it, the Oasis. And that's how I kind of see it, of just like, we're still going to have everything that we do today, but you're also going to be able to view lots of things and eventually everything in a 3D world as well, and just make it that much more interactive and engaging and impactful.
Yeah, I still can't imagine myself coming home like from like a hard day at work and then spending X amount, like a long time with a headset on my head. That's one of the hardest things I really have to try and think about is how am I going to be fully immersed and comfortable and intrigued and engaged with a headset on my head. And I feel like it's going to have to be something like the Matrix, where something's plugged into the back of your brain, and then I'm fully into it, and then it's almost like I can't tell what is reality and what's not. I think that's,
Yeah.
for me, that's the
Yeah,
stage it's going to have to get to.
I think that's where it's like, that's kind of like I feel like the late adopters of like fully adoption, that's kind of where people will come in. I feel like, I think the mass adoption side of things is a little bit before that, before like Neuralink, or what you see in like some of the Black Mirror episodes with those on where it's like, we're both wearing glasses right now, and we have X-Real. They just released their Air 2 glasses, which basically look like a pair of sunglasses. Apple's coming out with their headset, and obviously it's pretty bulky right now, but it will keep getting slimmer. And I can see how you'd be wearing a pair of glasses and you're using them at work to have your screen. You get home and now you don't have a TV on the wall, and you just throw up a screen wherever you want it. And now you're going to move into the kitchen to do some cooking, and it just follows you and goes to a set location in the kitchen. And so like, I think it will still be a lot of 2D video and things in those cases, because you're right, like, you're not going to get home and jump into, instead of watching a movie, I'm going to play a 2-hour game where I'm battling dragons. Like, that's something you might do on the weekends or a Friday night or something, but most of the time you're still going to want to relax and you don't want to be fully interactive with something. So it's going to be getting to a pair of glasses where you can just have those on at all times and still have your regular 2D experiences, but then quickly switch into full VR 3D experiences as well.
Yeah, I honestly think as well that AR will play the biggest part in the future. I think it just has more real world use cases that people actually would like and need. Like, as you said, like, you're in a kitchen and you're looking at the ingredients on the table, and it's actually giving you step by steps on how to make some sort of dish that I could definitely get around. I need some help in the kitchen at all times. So that's that kind of stuff where it's just in my glasses. I'm like, okay, no, I don't like that recipe. No, I don't like that recipe. Yeah. Okay. Next one, kind of thing. I could fully get around that. AI, it's a topic that we have to talk about because, it's everywhere at the moment. I was on a podcast last night with a guy called Christopher Lafayette, who you may have seen him in the XR space. Really, really cool
sure.
guy. We had such a crazy conversation about AI, and it almost got to the point where we were like, tinfoil hat wearers in our mom's basement. It nearly got into that zone of craziness, but it was a super cool conversation. But like, first of all, on a business standpoint, like, how are you guys utilizing AI as a company, and is as like a founder and a CEO? Is it something you're encouraging people to use within your company?
Oh, definitely encouraging everyone to use it. Our development team, I think, is probably using it the most, either development or business. The 3D modeling team isn't able to use it too much. There are some interesting tools out there, but they're kind of in beta or alpha stages, so it's not something we can necessarily use. But like code interpreter and those sorts of tools for all the programmers and developers on our team, it's something that they're definitely using. And it's from talking to them, obviously I'm not very technical, so I don't know everything on how the programming works, but from talking to them, they kind of use it in a when they're getting stuck kind of way. And then they can feed in like, hey, this is where I'm stuck, I'm running into this issue, and then it's able to spit out an example of how the AI would fix it, and then they can like build off of that. So I think it's being used there, and I feel like we're going to use it a lot more moving forward. On the business side of things, I know that we got 5 people on our business team, our side of things, and everyone's using AI in multiple ways. I think social media posts is one of the major areas where it's like I know for myself to craft like a really engaging social media post that feeds the algorithm and all those things is kind of difficult, but I know what I want to say. So I can go into ChatGPT and say like, here's a video that I made. Like I just posted one right before this podcast for our Friday recap. I'm like, here's the video. Here's the links to the articles that I talked about. Here's like the points that I talked about on each of those articles of why it's interesting for the education space specifically. Make me a post that's engaging on LinkedIn. And then it makes that post. And it's like, okay, it's not just copy and pasting things from the article and spitting it out, or it's not something that I don't think somebody else could create with the AI because it still has my personal spin on it. But it allows me to be a lot more creative in that way where I don't have to think about all the algorithm type stuff. So using it there, we're starting to use it on like RFP responses where we have to write these 63-page documents and things to respond to requests for proposals. So using it a lot there. Yeah, using it a lot. I am a little worried of where it will go in the future of, just taking all kinds of different jobs. I'm a big supporter or very interested in like universal basic income and that side of things and how that could kind of combat AI. And obviously like Sam Altman and people talk about that a lot. So I think that's an interesting space of maybe it's good that AI is taking jobs. Hopefully nobody clips that out in wrong context. But yeah, I think there's good and bad.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the thing with AI is that it's on a forward momentum so fast that it might not be able to be stopped anyway, even if they wanted to. But I think is an interesting question to think about is if you were in charge of OpenAI, for example, if you were in charge, would you slow it down? Like, put
I
yourself in their shoes for a second, like, because I think it's all very easy for us all to stand on the outside, and throw stones at this glass house. But I think if you put yourself in their shoes, him or Mike, I think we have to think about that. What would you do if you were in charge?
yeah, I obviously I don't know all the inner workings, but like I think I would be staying on the same path they're on right now and continuing to grow because I think there's on both the business and the ethical side of things, there's issues. So on the business side, obviously, OpenAI is losing money right now, and so they need to keep growing and build out products where they can generate cash flow and be a revenue producing company. So that side they have to keep growing, and then on the ethical side of things, like it's like, oh, you might think, oh, it's ethical to take a pause right now and to stop. But if we're looking at OpenAI maybe as um, the top dog in the AI space in the West, like I'm not very into like politics and everything, but obviously there could be bad that could come from China or North Korea or Russia or other places, and specifically China is developing a lot of AI as well. And it's like if good or bad, if they're not pausing, then maybe we shouldn't be pausing either. And like we don't want them to surpass. And not that I have anything against China necessarily, but the geopolitical conversations around China. It's like, well, we should be on the same competitive playing board, and AI is developing rapidly. So if we pause for a couple months or a year, like they could leapfrog us, or any country or any company could leapfrog OpenAI 10 times over that time. So
Yeah,
they have
yeah,
to stay developing.
and that's the problem, right? You don't want to be overtaken, and then everyone's on full steam ahead with no safety guards and no safety rails, and then it turns into iRobot, and Will Smith has to come and save us. And let's hope it
Yes.
doesn't come to that. Let's
Hopefully not.
let's hope it doesn't come to that. But I know they all met at the Senate. I think it was yesterday,
Mm.
and Elon was there, Zucks, Sam Altman, loads of senators, and they were discussing. Bill Gates was there. I think he just got like a free pass or something. I'm not sure. And they basically were discussing, how it should be government. Should it be governmentally controlled, and how would that happen in the future? But I think it was more like political posturing on like we're talking about this, we're talking about this is a problem, and I don't know if it's fear mongering from Elon or he's just bitter that he's no longer involved in OpenAI.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he seems to think that if there's a 1% chance of it killing us, that should be enough for us to really consider our options.
Right. I think it's good to have the conversations and consider it. But yeah, I think if we're setting guardrails and safety nets and things along those lines, like they have to be industry wide. They have to be adopted by everybody because
And
great, we can
and
stop.
how are we going to tell China to slow down? Exactly,
Exactly.
it's never going to happen. So
Exactly.
let's go full
Exactly.
steam ahead, everyone. Let's just let's get to that utopian situation that we all want. No work.
Yes. And like it's like we joke and no work and everything, but I think it's like obviously AI is possibly taking like artist jobs and everything, and that is like the creative sector where people do want to work and everything. But I think there will always be an interest in humans making art and humans doing creative projects and things. So it's like I I do hope that there is a future, and maybe it's very optimistic of me, but I do hope that there's a future where AI is able to replace all the mediocre, boring jobs, and now everyone is able to explore their passions, and there are those abilities to go into creative spaces or just travel the world and experience things or help stop pollution and these other big issues that are happening and everything, and put more people towards those other important areas or exciting areas that they want to work in. And then there would still be jobs, but it's very optional, and yeah, obviously it's very
Yeah, that,
utopian and optimistic.
yeah, and you know what? I kind of understand that. I really do. I can see how that would be a good thing, but I honestly don't think humans are built to do nothing. I think
Yes.
if we were just left our own devices and not given like direction, we're just going to turn back to our ancestral roots of just pulling each other's heads off and like I don't know. We Have you ever seen somebody go on like a 4-week holiday and just sit by the pool? It never happens. You go
Yes.
stir crazy after like the first week, and then you're like, I need to
Yes.
do something, and I just see it like that. I can't imagine it happening. But anyway, we digress a little bit. One thing I wanted to bring up that we talked about on the call 2 weeks ago was the bus, because
Yes. Big pivot.
the famous bus has been it's been worked on now for how long?
I think we're coming in at 6, 7 months, 7 or so months. Been working
Okay,
on it
and
now.
and give us some context around the bus, because people are probably thinking, what are they
Oh, it's a
talking about? What
bus.
bus?
It went
Give
from
us some
VR to
context
AI
around
to a bus. Yeah. Yeah. Basically, I love to travel, as well as we're finding now coming out of COVID, like we're having calls like this over video and introducing VR to people, but people want to hold the headset in their hands, put it on their face, and experience the simulations that we're creating. And we're flying out to places all over North America to make sure that we can facilitate that. Um, but it's very quick, and obviously it costs lots of money to fly around places and coordinate all of that. So we came up with the idea somewhere around a year ago, where we're like, why don't we buy a bus? We're in the education space, buy a bus. We bought a 24-foot short bus and have converted into a very small VR demo space, but also a podcast studio and just something that can kind of show off VR and bring up the conversation of VR some more, so that we can introduce it to more educational institutions, more government departments. So it's almost done. I was actually working with our electrician this morning, wrapping up some of the electrical side of things. Plumbing still needs to be installed, and then other than that, it's almost done. Um, so we're hoping by end of September or so, in the next 2 weeks, it will be on the road. But we'll have some big announcements coming up once we have that confirmed date. And basically, I'll be driving this bus. I have Starlink, talking about Elon Musk, hooked up, so that I'll still be working remotely like I have been. But then every week, stopping into multiple educational institutions, government departments, fire departments, police departments, um, starting here in Ontario, going out to the west coast of Canada, so stopping in all the provinces along the way, in up until BC, and then heading south, going down to California, and kind of zigzagging through the states, and just trying to get VR into as many people's hands as possible, so that they can experience what this transformational technology is like.
So cool. I'm so jealous. I'm not gonna lie. And so there's plumbing on it. So are you gonna sleep in there as well? Are you
Yeah,
gonna
yeah, it's a good point to mention. It
really?
is also my full-time home moving forward. So I got a Murphy bed built into it, like a double-sized bed. There's a composting toilet, sink, shower, stovetop, huge countertop, which I think the countertop's the most exciting part. We're finishing it actually tonight. And basically, we took a live edge piece of wood and poured epoxy to create the countertop, the front face of it. And I'm a big Star Wars fan, so we recreated the Battle of Endor with Lego characters inside of the epoxy, and so that's going to be the main piece of the bus. So yeah, very excited for that.
That is awesome. That is awesome. I didn't realize you're a huge Star Wars fan. I am too, but not to that level. I'm more of a nostalgic Star Wars fan where yeah,
I have been as well, but having this opportunity to design the bus, I had a friend that builds epoxy tables, and he was doing some Star Wars designs, and I was like, "Hey, I have a lot of Lego. Like, what can we do here?" And he's like, "This sounds like a cool project. I'll work on it with you." And yeah,
and so then just to recap then. So moving on in the fall, like full steam ahead with Expert VR. There's no other side projects. You're fully focused on Expert VR, and that's the ship that's sailing for the foreseeable future.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's I'm gonna have like a TikTok going with the bus, and that's maybe a little side project, creative project that I'll be
Yeah,
working on because I like video editing and messing around with that and just capturing my travels. But yeah, Expert VR, full steam ahead. We had our 6-year anniversary 16 days ago, so it's been an exciting time with just everything that we see on the horizon and everything that we just talked about. So yeah, full steam ahead and just hitting those 3 goals that I talked about of building that emergency services town, then a bigger library of educational content, and then hopefully becoming the education department of the metaverse, whatever that is.
nice. And if anybody wants to find you, where do they find Evan, and where do they find Expert VR?
Yeah, LinkedIn is definitely the best place. Make at least 1 post per day on LinkedIn and share, and always happy to connect with people there, and just very easy to chat back and forth instead of email. But email also works. It's just evan@expertvr.com. And otherwise, our website is expertvr.com or .ca, and you can go there and there's contact info, and you can learn more about everyone on our team, projects we've done, all those sorts of things. Expert VR is big on LinkedIn as well.
Nice, Evan. Well, look, we're coming towards the elucid hour. There's probably like three or four things I would like to talk about, but we'll save that for another time. So, first of all, thank you for your time. Sorry I was late to the prequel. Sorry
No
about
worries.
that.
No, thank you for having me on, David.
Other work commitments came in the way. But dude, honestly, thank you so much for your time. I know you could have chosen to do anything with this hour, so I really appreciate that you gave me the time. So from me and Chris, thank you very much, mate. Okay.
No, for sure. Thank you for having me on, David. And yeah, we'll definitely have to have another conversation because we went into a lot of my personal background and things, but I'd love to learn more about yourself as well. So
I'm
thank you for
sure we
having me
will.
on.
Cool. No worries, man. I'll speak to you soon.
Talk soon. Thanks, David.
Thanks, mate.